take over everybody's computer. And here we go. One of the easiest ways you can do a double exposure, and I found this from a website. If you do a Google search for double exposure tutorials or Photoshop tutorials to do this, this is where I found this one, is simply by changing your blending mode for two different photographs. So in this case, I've got two relatively dark ones. Oops, got my feather turned on, set that down to 0. And if I was to take one of the images, we'll cut it and paste it. Notice in my layers, one's on one layer, one's on top of the other. And if I change my blending mode between those two layers, it gives me effects that'll look something like this. Maybe screen would be best. Ah, there we go. And so now I've got an image that looks more like this. Pretty cool. And you can see how in just a few seconds I was able to set this up and have it work. The downside with using this is that it doesn't work for every single image. This one happens to work because both of the images are relatively dark and it's got a lighter area, and the screen mode works best for getting rid of those dark over light areas. But if I tried to do this with other kinds of photographs, it may not come out or give me the same effects. I certainly wouldn't have the amount of control to say exactly where I want the edge to stop. So what we're going to do today is going to give you a little bit more control over doing it, though what I just did with changing the blending effect is the simplest way of doing it. Let's see, so close it out. If you go to today's Moodle page, here we are. Oh, come on. Hope it didn't disconnect to me. There is an exercise folder where you can download a variety of different things. One of the things you can download is I'm giving you two different model portraits. If you don't want to use your own photograph, you can use one of these two photographs for that as well. If you do want to photograph yourself, in front of the whiteboard tends to be the best place so you can get rid of the background and blend things up a lot better. I'm also giving you two different photos of trees around the campus. And if you open them up, went ahead of time and I took photographs of mostly the edges of trees. This is kind of what I'm looking for. Different styles of trees, different makeups. Something that's got a good edge to it. Some of them have buildings in the background, some of them are just plain plants by themselves. You can use one image or you can combine multiple images together. You can see all different details. Work within those two particular pictures. Here's the one that I did last year. I took a picture of myself and this was the results that I came up with. I even did an alternate one. I thought this one looked a little bit more surreal in working with it. What you're going to do is combine your image, or at least the image of a portrait, with one of the trees. If you look at my layers palette, you can see the variety of layers that went into doing this. It's not a lot of them, but I've got one image of my image and I've got other layers of the tree images. And in between there I'm using clipping masks and I'm using layer masks to tell exactly where I want different things to be. I'm going to work with one of the models for today. So we'll go into Photoshop, make our new document. I'm saying to make it 8 by 10. And we're going to work in RGB color mode. Say OK. The first thing we need to do is to place our picture on there. Your picture of, picture of the trees on there first. Let's see if we can find a good image of trees. I liked using this one simply because it gave me a good little detail. Nice blue sky in the background. We'll drag it onto here. Since I drug it directly onto here, I'm getting a smart object. So if I tried to use my eraser or my paintbrush, it's going to give me an error, but that's okay. I need to remove the blue from this area. And to do that, we're going to mask it out. But here's the fun part. In order to select the blue, it's going to be very difficult to try to paint a mask inside of here. Even if I used my quick selection tools, I can get most everything, but I can't pick up all the little details inside of there. So to select the blue, I'm going to go up to Select and we're going to choose from our color range. Color range gives me the ability to select exactly what range of colors, in this case the darks and light blues, that I want to pick up from. By default, it's not going to have invert checked. So whenever I click on something, you can see my preview, wherever it's white, that's what's being selected. So if I click on the blue area, you can see how the blue lights up. The second thing is the fuzziness. You've got some dark pixels of blue over here, and you've got some lighter pixels towards this end of the sky. And if I adjust my fuzziness, you can see how I can adjust the light and darks of those blues. Since I want to select all of the blue, I'm going to keep my fuzziness pretty high. I've actually maxed it all the way out to 200%. So I've got the blue selected. I really want to keep the tree. So what I need to do is invert my selection. Does that make sense? Because if I said OK now, my sky would be selected, but I actually want to get rid of my sky. So I'm going to invert it. Now you can see the tree is selected. Did I lose everybody on that? Okay, cool. That's one of the small details you've got to remember when working from it. So when I say OK, check out what I've got. You can see my little marching ants have the tree nice and selected. So to get rid of the sky, if I apply the layer mask now, my layer mask has been applied to the tree, masking out the rest of my sky. If you do that and you've only got sky selected, you didn't invert it. That's one of the common problems that comes up. So now I'm left with a nice tree image. If I take away my background, you can see the checkered. It's actually transparent behind there. That's step one. Now comes the fun part, actually adding my model's portrait into here as well. We'll drag him onto there. Lock him in for now. Later on, I can go back and I can scale it. I'm actually going to turn off my tree portion. And I need to do the same thing for him. I need to trim his portrait out from the background. To do this, we are going to use the quick selection. So I've got my quick select. I'm going to select just him. The fun part is going to be selecting his hair, because he's got nice frizzy hair. I've got him selected, but if I was to turn on my mask now, his edges are going to look like this. What I need to do is I need to refine the edges of my mask. I need to tell the computer to look for all those little details that are in here. In order to do this, I'm going to control-click on my layer mask. One of the options is called a refine mask, and it's going to pull up this little dialog box. You've got a variety of different options to play around with, but the refine mask works like a brush where if I paint over this area, I can tell the computer to look for the edges and the contrast between those edges. Now if I let go, I get an edge mask that looks more like this. Not 100%, but it's a whole lot better than the hard edge that I have back here. So let's do the rest of them. Even if I go along the edge of his figure, you can see it picks up a lot better details, things that I may or may not have missed. Now since he's wearing a gray shirt, you got a gray background, you can got some ambiguity back here. I'm going to be erasing away, so I'm not too worried about that. Back here looks a lot better because there's good contrast. I can play around with some of the adjustments, turning on the radius so that it'll change up a little bit. One of the best adjustments I like to use is the contrast adjustment. If I bring up the contrast, you can see it'll give it a lot more refined edge that way. Once I'm done, since I'm going to just be changing the layer mask, I can say OK, and it'll update my mask, and it gives me a much, much better selection. Again, to find that, I just control-click on my layer mask, and that gives me that option to refine that layer mask as well. Next step, once I've got my person cut out, once I've got my trees cut out, I need to be able to overlay both of them. What I would like to do, if we've seen in our examples, is to only show part. Let's see if I can go back to my example. There we go. I want to show part of my image inside another part of it. So what I need to do is I need to create kind of a mask that intermarries one layer and another layer. And to do that, that's where our clipping mask layer comes in. A clipping mask, I've got the portrait on top of this one. If I go to Layer, down to Create Clipping Mask, got a little arrow that points down to this one. Notice now what I've got. Everything that there's pixels inside of here only allows pixels in the portrait to show up. I can actually move it around. So I've got my portrait layer selected. Notice how his image only shows up if there's pixels below it. Pretty cool? That's what you got to keep in mind when working with this, because once I start to refine the edge, then I need to know what to select to get it back. For instance, if I want to bring back his ear, I'm in his portrait layer, and if I try to refine the mask, well, the mask is already there. I can't really bring back the ear. What I need to do is I need to work on the tree layer. It's the tree layer that's not showing me these pixels. And if I paint black in this area, let's bring it up to 100%. Paint black in this area, paint white in this area, it'll actually remask it and I can bring back that particular part. The trick with this is understanding what layer you're working on to get the effect that you want. Right now he's got a pretty good little placement. I like that he's kind of blending off to the back there, this area. I'd want to clean up this so I can see more of the edge of his face. So let's do that. I definitely need to get rid of this part of the tree. I'm on the tree layer. I'm on my tree mask. So let's mask out some of this tree. All I got to do is paint black where I want it to mask away. Now if I do this, why am I losing his picture?
Is the pixels underneath?
Bingo, because of the pixels underneath. If I lose pixels on my tree layer, I'm going to lose pixels also on my portrait layer. But we're going to bring them back too. My main concern is that I'm getting rid of all of this back here. As the artist, I'm mainly paying attention to all of this. Here comes the fun part. Let's bring back this particular layer. I could swap this back over to white, go back in and repaint in that. It's going to be a little bit difficult trying to not get one edge and get the other. Here's another thing I can do. I've got his portrait. I've already got his portrait cut out. I'm going to make a copy of this layer. Drag it down to here. Again, it's clipped to this area, so I need to unclip it. Layer, and release the clipping mask. Now check out what I got. I've got my edge back here. I need to get rid of this back area. Working in its layer, grab my brush, and let's erase away this area. Paying attention that I work on the appropriate side. All I care about is this side of him. Can bring down the opacity so I can blend it a little bit more. Slowly, slowly pull it away. Pretty good, pretty cool. What do you think? Some other ways I can refine this particular edge is by selecting my blending modes. So in this case, if I wanted the colors to kind of intermarry with each other, I've got this layer selected, which remember is this part. I can do things like multiply it together. It's obviously too dark. Maybe lighten or screen would give me, there we go, a little bit better transition to the other one. Another thing I can do, and I'm on the back side of the handout that I gave you, is adjust what are called the blend if sliders. I wish I could show you a better example of this one. But to find the blend if, let's see if I can, I'll do it on this one. I've double clicked on a layer to bring up my layer effects. Right now I'm in my blending options panel. At the very bottom, the blend if tells you to blend layers on one layer and the one underneath based on how gray it is, or the light and darkness of it. So if I was to drag this down, let's see if I could, it's not going to show. There we go. It's getting rid of just the lighter areas of that image. You can see it cutting away. If I hold down my Option key, I can actually split that up. You can see how that right there is split, and it'll blend it a little bit better. More of a gradation for there, versus if it was together, it's a little bit harder. It probably isn't the best example. I'll try to find a better one for you, but that's what that's doing if you want to blend both of those. This will control the darker areas, and so those can come together. Now you can see it actually picking up on some of the shadows from this particular one. Let's pull that back in. We'll keep the shadows blending for that. We'll say OK. Bring out certain details by adjusting your layer mask, changing your blending modes, all of that. Last thing that we want to do is to turn this black and white. It looks, you could keep it in color. That actually, for this one, worked out pretty good. I could clean up the edges a little more. Quickest way to turn something black and white, so you've got an adjustment layer. And the black and white is this one in the center. And it's going to add an adjustment layer at the very top of your area. So this will turn everything into one solid color. From here you can refine the lights and darks of certain color ranges. In this case there's a lot of green to it, so I can make the, actually there's not a lot of green. It's the reds and blues. I can make those pop or not pop from there. If I needed to adjust the size of it, since they're all on different layers, make it a little bit larger. Got my properties in the way. There we go. And I've created something that uses both layer masking and my clipping mask to blend together one particular set of objects. Pretty cool? I know I flew by that. You saw how easy it was to do this. The main trick when working with this kind of project is understanding what layer you're working on and what mask that you're using. Make sure you're choosing the mask. Make sure you're clipping to the right layer once it's finished. I'll be walking around helping you all through this. When you're finished, you'll save it as a JPEG. So I'm going to flatten my layers. Save as a JPEG, and I'll have a place on Moodle for you to upload with this. Once you're finished with this one, I'm going to walk around. I also want to see your ideas for your illustrations that you're working on. Any questions? All right, I'm going to turn it over to y'all and let y'all get started.